مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. أنا مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. كان التهديد الأكثر عنفا على جمهوريتنا، ولربما التحدي الدستوري الأخطر الذي تواجهه ديمقراطيتنا خلال تاريخنا. واليوم بعد 15 شهرا على تمرد 6 يناير تصلنا معلومات مفاجئة جديدة كل يوم تقريبا من لجنة الكونغرس الخاصة التي تحقق في الحدث. ويبقى السؤال الرئيسي المطروح: هل هناك من يأبه لذلك؟ منذ التمرد بدأ رئيس جديد ولايته، تلقى معظم الأميركيين لقاحات كوفيد، ارتفعت نسبة التضخم بشكل كبير، غادر جنودنا أفغانستان، روسيا اجتاحت أوكرانيا، وويل سميث صفع كريس روك. وبالرغم من كل ما حصل، الديمقراطيون يخشون خسارة مجلسي النواب والشيوخ معا في نوفمبر القادم. هل 6 يناير هو حدث تاريخي أم سياسي؟ لمناقشة هذا السؤال يسرني أن أستضيف المراسلين السياسيين اللامعين ميني راكر وأليكس بولتون. It was the most violent moment in Washington in over 150 years. It was the insurrection. It was the mob that attacked the US Capitol and tried to overturn the results of a presidential election. January 6th, 2021. A congressional committee has been taking a look at these events, and they have explosive results, headlines across America, really surprising news. But does anybody care? We're going to take a look at the headlines that are emerging from the congressional investigation into January 6th, and then we're going to ask the political questions around these revelations and whether it will have any impact when Americans go to vote again this November. I'm delighted to welcome Alex Bolton and Minnie Racker to take us through this very interesting, very important set of events. All right, thanks for joining us today. What are some of the big stories to emerge from the investigation into January 6th that we've been reading about these last few weeks? Alex?
Well, some of the biggest revelations actually have come from this forthcoming book by two New York Times reporters, Jonathan Martin and Alexander Burns. And it lays out, I think the biggest revelation in recent days is that Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, had told his colleagues in a private conversation, a conference call, that he expected the impeachment resolution that was considered at the beginning of 2021 to pass, and that he was going to advise President Trump to step down, to resign. Now, McCarthy initially called that reporting false, but then the big bombshell was that there was a recording, a more than hour-long recording of this conference call that leaked. We don't know where it came from, but on that recording, McCarthy very clearly says that he planned or was certainly considering asking President Trump to resign. So that is it's a major revelation. And the other big revelation of that book is there was a dialogue with Mitch McConnell, on January 6th after all the chaos, where McConnell said that Trump had effectively put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger and had finished himself off as a leader of the Republican Party. Well, that turned out to be wrong. President Trump is still very strong, is playing a role in the midterm elections, endorsing candidates. He's expected to run again for president in 2024. He's expected to win the nomination. So it shows that McConnell's assessment that Trump was finished as a politician was wrong. And it also shows why McCarthy, his transition explains that, he went from, he thought that Trump was finished. He thought that the impeachment resolution was going to pass. As we know, it got very little support in the House. And now Trump is, back. I don't know if he's stronger than ever, or as strong as ever, but he certainly he's a force, and he's running for president in 2024. And it looks like it'd be tough for him not to get the nomination unless he has a health issue, which is something he's floated as maybe a reason for him not to run.
And Minnie, why is this Kevin McCarthy story as explosive as Alex is suggesting? Why is it a big deal that we now have this hour-long audio tape of this Republican conference?
Well, so I think one of the main political dynamics to come out of January 6th was this kind of division in the Republican Party over, are you loyal to Trump or are you not loyal to Trump? And soon after January 6th, Kevin McCarthy was back on board with Trump, took a photo with him at Mar-a-Lago, and has tried to portray himself, at least, as a loyalist ever since. And that's kind of how he's won trust with a huge number of the conservative members of his caucus, and of these members who are loyal to Trump. So to have this evidence on tape that, maybe Kevin McCarthy was not so loyal really puts into question his future as a leader of the party. Republicans are expected to retake the House in November, maybe even the Senate, and Kevin McCarthy is expected to be a power player in Washington. But if his loyalties aren't lined up with the person who is probably the most important person in the party still, that really throws into question whether he's going to have that power that he clearly wants to have.
And how have these revelations played out with other Republicans on Capitol Hill? Are people surprised to learn that Kevin McCarthy flip-flopped on whether Donald Trump should remain president after the January 6th events? Alex?
Well, the reporting at the beginning of this week is that McCarthy was making rounds of calls to his Republican colleagues and letting them know that President Trump would not hold this revelation against him, that he had been forgiven by Trump for suggesting or even talking with his House Republican advisors about asking him to resign. So what McCarthy was most concerned about when this revelation came out is that it would cause a rift between him and Trump. Again, another sign of Trump's power in the Republican Party. McCarthy basically, made amends with Trump immediately, and Trump said that he would not hold it against him. And so then McCarthy called his GOP colleagues and said, look, I'm good with Trump, don't worry about it. In other words, McCarthy recognized that if Trump were to disavow him, his future as potential speaker, if Republicans do in fact take control of the House after the November elections, as expected, would be very much in jeopardy. So, McCarthy, can't hug Trump any more than he is right now. Now, McConnell, on the other hand, was asked about this at a press conference. What did he think of McCarthy's, basic public flip-flop? And McConnell did not want to comment on it. He said, I've already spoken about this. It's his standard answer. He said, I spoke about this on January 6th when he gave a floor speech. And then after the impeachment trial in February 2021, he also excoriated Trump on the floor. He said, I've already said what I have to say on this issue, completely dodged the question. So it shows, I think, that McConnell is worried about Trump's power, although he's not going to the he's not going as far as McCarthy to buddy up to Trump.
And many among the people that you speak with, has Donald Trump's power, his thrall, his control over other Republicans? We'll talk about the rest of the country a bit later on. Has it waned, or is it still as dominating as it was when he was in the Oval Office?
I mean, I suppose you could say if he's not the president anymore, it's not as dominating. We've seen some evidence that it's not the most important issue, at least, as you alluded to, among voters. But I would say among Republican politicians, he's still going really strong. I might point to, for example, all of the primaries that are currently happening against many of the members who voted to impeach Trump in the wake of January 6th. So many of these are kind of moderate Republicans. Some of them are more conservative Republicans who just thought it was the right choice at the time. And they're facing some of the battles of their careers. Liz Cheney, for instance, in Wyoming, is facing, a very well-supported primary challenger and, maybe at risk. And we see that for the other 9 Republicans, for most of them also who chose that decision out of their, out of their principles. And that's affecting them politically now, 15 months later.
I mean, maybe I'm not reading all the right newspapers and not watching all the right cable shows, but it doesn't seem to me that the McCarthy story triggered a wildfire. I mean, among aficionados, sure, but in the broader political world and the broader readership and viewership, it didn't seem to trigger an awful lot of reaction. Alex, is it a non-story, even if it's a big story?
Have you not been watching MSNBC? I can tell you're not an MSNBC viewer because for the partisan press, if you want to call it that, I mean, this is a big story. It's cat.
It is. Okay.
And I mean, there's been a fair amount of national coverage of this. CNN, Washington Post, New York Times. I mean, they've all written about this story. The reason why maybe it's not getting the level of visibility that you might expect is that it's not an ongoing story, really. I mean, it's something that happened 15 months ago, so it's a little bit old news. I mean, the January 6th investigation, I mean, the House investigation by the special committee, I mean, that is big news. I mean, that's driving a lot of traffic, generating a lot of attention. So people are interested in that. The revelation that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's kind of this extreme, Trump supporter down in Georgia, member of Congress, she in text messages with Mark Meadows, President Trump's chief of staff at the time, was saying that members of the House, Republican members of the House, wanted Trump to declare martial law to stay in power, and that was something that was revealed through the January 6th committee investigation. I mean, that was a big story. Now, is this one of the, I think what you're driving at, though, is this a big political story insofar as will it have any impact on the midterm elections? Some of these revelations are so kind of outrageous on some level. Will it change voters at all? And the answer to that, and I think Democrats and Republicans agree on this, is that it will not change how people vote because it doesn't affect voting behavior. People vote based on what's going to happen in the future, and they're primarily driven by the economy. So people primarily vote on what they think benefits themselves most economically. This doesn't have any impact on the economy. Where it could have impact, though, is if Trump does, in fact, win the Republican nomination in 2024, a lot of the stuff will be resurfaced because it will go to the question of whether he's fit for office. And I think it does really question his fitness for office. And I think it would give a lot of independents and moderate Republicans real pause about voting to put Trump back in office when all this stuff has been publicized and we see just how close he was to maybe declaring martial law, or how we see exactly what his involvement was in orchestrating the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
All right, so it's quite remarkable that we're throwing around a term in American politics, martial law, not something that we don't tend to use very much in our political lexicon. When we come back after the break, we're going to take a closer look at really what this House committee is doing, whether it will have any political impact, what are its powers, what is the ultimate goal, what can it do when it completes its investigation, and how this will affect or not affect the November legislative elections. When we come back after the break. Again, my guests today here on Dakhel, Washington include Minnie Racker. Minnie is a staff writer at the National Journal, where she covers the intersection of politics, identity, and culture. Also joining us for the first time on our show is Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer at The Hill, where he covers Congress and American politics. All right, we've been talking about the January 6th investigation. It's a House Select Committee that is taking the closest look at what is going on. Let's just explain for our viewers, Minnie, why a House committee? Why not something also in the Senate? And what can this House committee ultimately do once it finishes its investigation?
So the committee has been around since last summer, I believe, and was a bit of a slog to make happen. Basically, 2 Republicans in the House agreed to have this body investigate January 6th, and that was Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who are on the committee now. And since then, the committee has basically focused on getting witnesses and people with information about January 6th in for interviews, for questioning. It has issued subpoenas for folks who have resisted coming in and for phone records that might reveal, in particular, I think, how much Trump knew about what was going on January 6th. And how much he chose not to take action as he learned about some of the violence going on. And I would say that's kind of the ultimate goal of this committee, is to tell this story, which seems to be, coming together in all of these revelations and all of these pieces, that, maybe it wasn't as innocent as Trump has claimed.
Ultimately, Alex, is there anything more that the committee can do beyond issue a report that summarizes its views of what happened? Is there any legal action that the committee can trigger?
Well, the big question is whether the committee will refer its report or refer a complaint to the Department of Justice and urge the Department of Justice to take action and launch a criminal prosecution. And this is an investigation; it's not a criminal prosecution. And there's debate among members of the January 6th Select Committee as to whether they want to refer the report to the Department of Justice to essentially recommend criminal prosecution. Some members of the committee worry that if they go that far, the Justice Department investigation would be seen as politically tainted or politically motivated. And so some members of the committee think it's better to put the report out there for the public to see. And then, whether Merrick Garland decides to, and that's the Attorney General of the Department of Justice, whether he decides to then prosecute Trump, would be his own decision. Whereas if they made a referral to the Department of Justice, then it would be seen as the committee, nudging or urging the DOJ, Department of Justice, to take action, and that would, potentially would give Garland, the Attorney General, more incentive to act. But on the other hand, it could make any investigation, criminal investigation, seen as politically driven, politically motivated, politically tainted, and therefore less effective.
Let me broaden this for a moment, really to get at the question that we were talking about a few moments ago, namely the political impact of this whole exercise. You suggested, Alex, that really this may not have an impact until 2024, if and when Donald Trump runs for another term in the White House. That's a long time from now, and a lot can happen in American politics between now and 2024. People's memories in American politics often don't last that long. Will there be no impact on any of the candidates, on the prospects for Republicans to take one or both of the houses in November? Minnie, do you think that Ukraine, inflation, all those issues will drown this out? Or will there be some voters for whom other Republican responsibility for January 6th will impact their vote?
So this is a really good question. I would largely agree with Alex that all the polling we see so far shows that cost of living, inflation is one of the top issues, if not the top issue for voters. And we're seeing both parties respond to that in their campaign messaging and their campaign strategy. People on the campaign trail, they are not finding that much value in bringing up January 6th. They're finding value in talking about how are we going to lower gas prices? How are we going to make groceries more affordable?
All right. Alex Bolton, Minnie Racker, thank you for helping to explain the political context behind the January 6th investigation and where it's likely to go as we prepare for the November congressional elections. Thank you very much for joining us on Dakhel, Washington. If you follow America from abroad, you probably read a lot about inflation, the upcoming primary elections, and the slap heard round the world, Will Smith hitting Chris Rock. But out there across America, there are real battles being fought, state after state, county after county, town after town, on highly emotive issues that define red versus blue America. Here are four of them. First, abortion. The vast majority of Americans support the basic idea enshrined in the half-century-old Supreme Court ruling that legalized abortion in the first 2 trimesters, while giving the government the right to regulate it. But in our system, strong, committed minorities are able to shift public policy if they're single-minded on their issue. And that is what's happening, especially in southern and western states, with the passage of laws not only banning abortion completely after 15 or 22 weeks of pregnancy, but getting around federal review by authorizing individuals to enforce these laws by giving ordinary citizens the right to file criminal complaints against anyone participating or assisting an abortion after that date. That's a whole new ballgame. Secondly, restrictions in education. The classroom is a battleground of American politics where parents fight out their ideological battles with the kids as victims. Sometimes this is about how much kids should be exposed to the less noble aspects of our history, especially the streak of racism that hounded America for centuries. Sometimes this is about how much kids should be exposed to real-life issues in the books that are available to them in school libraries. And more recently, it is about whether kids should be shielded from the fact that many people are gay, fully deserving of rights, compassion, and inclusion. And then there's the third issue, guns. In many parts of America, the explosive issues are not over what types of guns should be banned, or how long a waiting period should be, or how much training should be required for a gun license. On those issues, reasonable people can have a civil debate. Rather, in some parts of the country, the issue is about open carry laws, with an intense, committed portion of the electorate pushing for zero restrictions, and even the right to carry weapons openly everywhere one wants to go. Here, there's a fundamental divide, one that is impossible to bridge. I'll put my own cards on the table. I may be a muscular internationalist on foreign policy, but I lean center-left on almost all these culture issues. I support abortion rights. I still subscribe to the motto that we should make them safe, legal, and rare. I am pro-free speech when it comes to all these shameful restrictions on education. Our kids are already growing up in a world where the internet offers a buffet of absurd, outlandish, obscene offerings. Are we really going to protect them by pulling Pulitzer Prize-winning novels from the bookshelf and telling teachers they can't say gay in the classroom? And on guns, I have no sympathy for the absolutism of the pro-gun fringe. No sane country should let individuals own submachine guns or walk into a restaurant, mall, or store with a pistol strapped to their waist. These are the issues that define American politics today. If you want to know about America, you need to follow them closely. وصلنا إلى ختام هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إن كانت لديكم أي أسئلة أو تعليقات حول البرنامج وبالأخص بشأن مستقبل الحزب الجمهوري في ظل قيادة دونالد ترامب، تواصلوا معي رجاء عبر تويتر على هاشتاج Inside Washington أو تراسلوني مباشرة على الرابط @RobSatloff. أراكم في الأسبوع القادم. حتى ذلك الحين شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.